Are you planning to come out to someone sometime soon? Or maybe you just want to know a little bit more about how to make the coming out process go a little bit smoother? In this video, I'm going to list 10 tips that have helped me as I've come out to the people I know and love. Hello everyone, welcome back. My name's Maddie, and here on this channel I make videos about LGBT issues and mental health. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing. And for returning subscribers, if you're wondering why there isn't a Christmas tree behind me, it's actually because I've moved. I'm starting divinity school next month, so I'm actually living with my girlfriend in a brand new city. It's an adventure, and it's super exciting, and also kind of terrifying, but mostly exciting. That being said, I might see if I can get a teeny tiny Christmas tree to put somewhere in frame, just to keep up the tradition. I don't know, we'll see what happens. Anyway, a little bit ago, I asked via the community tab if anyone had any topics related to mental health that they wanted me to talk about, and someone requested that I talk about coming out, specifically as it relates to living with parents or being quarantined with someone who might not be supportive or accepting. From the way this request was worded, it sounded more like they were talking about coming out as being part of the LGBT community and less coming out with a particular mental health diagnosis. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that coming out as not cis or straight is very similar to the process of coming out with a particular mental health diagnosis. So this video is about coming out in general, whether you're coming out as queer or trans or neurodivergent or as a religious minority. I hope you'll find these 10 tips helpful. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. So the first tip I have for you today is to put your safety first. If you are not reasonably sure that coming out will not put your well-being at risk, you absolutely should not come out. Seriously, if nothing else in this video resonates with you, let this be the one tip that does. You are under no obligation to come out to someone if it's not safe. You're under no obligation to come out to anyone, period. It's your choice. And it's not being dishonest or lying or anything of the sort. It's you putting yourself and your safety first. And if you're someone who doesn't like the feeling of putting yourself first because it feels selfish, same. I'm the exact same way. And if you're someone who doesn't like the feeling of not being an open book because you feel like it's lying or being dishonest, same. I'm in the same boat as you. But at the end of the day, your safety is the most important thing, so please don't feel pressured to come out to people who don't need to know every part of you. Before you ever come out to someone though, my advice to you is to do your research, which is the second tip on this list. If you're coming out as neurodivergent, do you understand your symptoms and prognosis well enough to explain it to someone in a way that's going to make sense to them? If you're coming out as being part of a religious minority, do you understand the tenets of your faith well enough to explain them to others? If you're coming out as a particular LGBT identity, do you understand that identity well enough to answer questions about it? Because tip number 3 is be prepared to answer questions, because I can just about guarantee you that people are going to have questions. When I first told my dad that my psychiatrist thought I had either schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, the very first thing he said was, okay, what does that mean? And after stumbling over my words for a few minutes, I eventually had to admit that I was really a little bit confused by the diagnosis myself. Fortunately, it was a pretty low pressure situation, and so I was able to do a quick Google search, look up the symptoms, and then we were able to have a conversation that way. But the conversation could have gone more smoothly if I had done some preliminary research about the diagnosis before coming out. So what are the best ways to come out to someone? Well, there really is no one best way. It really depends on who you are, who they are, and how you think they'll react. So tip number 4 is to remember that coming out is not a one-size-fits-all event. One person might really appreciate a little bit of humor when they're receiving big, important news, whereas someone else might prefer that you keep it serious. Some people might want to find out in person, whereas some people might prefer a text or an email. Everyone is different, and it's important to keep that in consideration when you're trying to think about how you want to come out to them. On that note, tip number 5 is to come out to people individually if possible. I personally feel like this allows you to come out to each individual person the way you think is best, and it also prevents group dynamics from getting in the way of what you want to say. Using myself as an example again, I grew up in a really strong Christian household, but I identify as pagan. So I came out to each of my family members individually, and that allowed them to ask questions and address concerns individually, and it all went pretty well, all things considered. But if I had decided to come out at the dinner table, I know my family well enough to know that things would have gotten pretty tense and awkward, and the conversation would have shut down for the time being, which would have been the exact opposite of what I wanted. It was still the exact same news, mind you, but changing the circumstances of how that news was delivered could have drastically changed the initial response to my coming out. That being said, it's possible that the exact opposite might be true for you and you don't want to be alone with the person you're coming out to, so please do what's best for you. In my case, I've just found that it's a lot easier to come out to people one at a time. It kind of allows me to control the narrative, if that makes sense. As for possible ways you could come out to someone, tip number 6 is something that I actually mentioned a little bit earlier, which is that you could write a letter or an email. That's actually how I came out to my parents, and I actually think it went a lot better than if I had come out in person, just because I am a better writer than I am a speaker. Coming out in person is just as valid though, and it might be the best option for you. I just feel like writing a letter or writing an email is one thing that people might not think of when it comes to coming out. Tip number 7 is to find positive representation and share it with the person you're planning to come out to. When I first thought that I might have DID or OSTD, I started showing my sister some TikToks made by Systems as a way of educating her on what dissociative disorders were, and it worked really well in our case. When I was officially diagnosed with OSTD-1B, my sister was one of the first people to know, and the conversation went really smoothly because she was already familiar with what I was talking about. The key here is to find positive representation of your identity that you can share with the person you're planning to come out to. People are more likely to be open and receptive if they already have a positive conception of your identity. The reverse is also true though, so be sure to pick your examples wisely. So what happens if you decide to come out to someone but they don't take it well? Well, in all honesty, it depends. My 8th tip for you is to give people time to adjust to the new news. I know when I came out as trans in 2017, 2018, I thought that it would probably take a month or two for my friends and family to adjust to the new names and pronouns. And for some people it was instantaneous, but for some it's still a work in progress 2 or 3 years later. And I won't lie, it can get hurtful and discouraging at times as you're waiting for this person you love to fully accept you for who you are. But as long as they're trying, there's still progress to be made. Slow progress is still progress. Give people time. That being said, tip number 9 is that you might have to make peace with the fact that some people don't need to be in your life post coming out. And for me, this was the hardest pill to swallow because I'm someone who will fight tooth and nail to keep the people I love in my life. But if they've made it clear that they have no intentions of accepting you for who you are, you need to let them go. Because you deserve better than that. You deserve so much better than that. And lastly, tip number 10 is to remember that coming out doesn't have to be a big event. Don't get me wrong, it totally can be. And I think there's a lot of beauty and value in screaming from the rooftops, "This is who I am." But you don't have to. For example, I don't know if you've noticed, but this is actually a coming out video. I've mentioned my mental health briefly on this channel, but I've never actually sat down and said, these are my diagnoses. But I did in this video. And sure, you could argue that coming out in a YouTube video is a big event, but compared to my initial plan to document my entire mental health journey starting from the age of 5, this is pretty low-key. And I kinda like it. I hope you found some of these tips helpful. If you did, be sure to share it with someone else who might find this helpful, and while you're at it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content just like this. Remember that you're wonderful, and that the world is a better place because you're in it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!